All right. Thanks for joining us tonight. B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. It is it's a very wonderful thing to be learning Hilchot Shabbat, especially in the month of Elul. Elul is Ani ledodi v'dodi li. Hashem says about Am Yisrael that we are His beloved, and we say that we are to Hashem as well. We're devoted and we're faithful, and there's nothing that speaks that out more clearly than Shabbat. Shabbat is a time where we connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we show Hashem that that's all we really want out of life, to be connected to Hashem. That's why when Shabbat is considered to be like Olam Haba, it's a time where you don't have to worry about anything, you don't have to worry about work, you don't have to worry about any other kind of thing that's on your mind. It's just pure connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing to do with phones and internet and all that. So it's all gone. You're disconnected from all of that. It's all pure connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's why it's so special, and that's why it's considered to be like Olam Haba, and that's why we don't want it to end. We want Shabbat to continue. We don't want it to come to a close. And this is how we show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that even during the week, we're thinking Shabbat. We're thinking about how we love Shabbat and how we want to have that special time with Hashem to connect. As it says, Shabbat is like Me'en Olam Haba. It's like a 60th, I believe they say, of Olam Haba, of the world to come. So, very special. Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. We continue tonight with Melacha number 35, I believe. So we're down the list. That's the Melacha of Soter. Soter is a melacha which means to destroy. Now, Soter technically is a melacha only if it's al menat livnot, which means for the purpose of building. Remember, where was Soter in the Mishkan? We know that building that's an easy one. That's to actually put together the Mishkan, to construct the Mishkan in the desert. Where is Soter destroying? Well, Soter is where you have to take apart the Mishkan and move to a new location. As you know, in the desert, the Jews traveled for 40 years from one location to the next, and they had to take apart the Mishkan. But the taking apart of the Mishkan was not a destructive act, but rather a constructive act, because that was what enabled them to rebuild the Mishkan in a new location. And the Gemara tells us that that new location is actually considered to be almost like the very same location, because wherever Hashem, they're putting that Mishkan wherever Hashem tells them to put that Mishkan. And the Gemara calls that Soter al menat livnot b'mekomo, which means that the act of destruction that you did was not an act of destruction, just straight up destruction. It was rather an act of destruction that was for the purpose of then taking that very same thing which you destroyed and then rebuilding over there in that location. Samech Vav Taf Reish. Okay, beautiful. So now we continue with the general outline of Soter. So again, Soter, in order for it to be Doraita, it has to be a constructive act. It has to be that you're taking it apart in order to build. So, for example, you destroy a building in order you knock down a house to put up a new house, right? That act of destruction is actually an act of construction. That's why on a Torah level it is now prohibited, because you're destroying for the sake of rebuilding. If you destroy purely for the sake of destroying, so it says a very important halakha in the laws of Shabbat, Kol Mevatel-Keli pturim, which means that any time that you do a destructive act that's purely destructive, it doesn't have any other kind of benefit to it. It's just an act that you destroy. So that act is considered to be forbidden still, but only forbidden midrabanan, rabbinically. Now, the reason that that's important is because, like we've already learned, that when things are prohibited only by the force of a rabbinical rule that they made, a decree that they made, so they also have the right to say that under certain circumstances that will be permissible. So I'll give you an example. let's say that a person wants to open up a metal bottle cap. Let's talk about metal bottle caps. Have you ever seen those those grape juices with bubbles in them? They have like a metal cap on top. I'm talking about. Yeah, sparkling grape juice. It's called, right? Sparkling grape juice. So you want to open up a sparkling grape juice, no problem, right? Why is that? Why is that? Well, what potentially could be the problem? So the problem with those, there's a difference in bottle caps. There are plastic bottle caps and there are metal bottle caps. Now, the way that I understood it, the metal bottle caps are not really a cap until you pop it off. In other words, the way that it works is on the conveyor belt, you have a bottle, you have this sheet of metal, and the machine kind of scrunches the metal on top of the cap, and then it moves on and it's sealed. And the very first time that it becomes a cap is when you pop it off. So you actually just made a cap. You should know a bottle cap is a very important vessel. It enables you, welcome. It enables you to go ahead and to use your drink again and again. Use the content, use the bottle and the contents that are inside of it over a long period of time. The poskim talk about what they used to have. When they had bottles of milk and bottles of water, it used to come in sealed glass bottles. That means you would have to smash open the top of the glass bottle, and then, once you open it, that's it, it's over. You got to pour everything out, or else, there's no way of keeping it there. It's in glass. So they would have to smash the top of the bottle, and that's how they'd be able to use their bottles. We have a beautiful invention called a bottle cap that you can screw on and screw off a bottle cap. It's a unique thing. We take it for granted, but it is a functioning vessel. It enables you to open and close the bottle, right? So to create a bottle cap is to create a vessel. That's something which all the poskim talk about. So the modern poskim speak about the difference between metal and plastic. They say plastic bottle caps are not really a problem, according to many, even though Chacham Ovadia Yosef Alav Hashem in his tshuva does say, ideally, you should try to open up those plastic bottle caps, let's say seltzer bottles, water bottles that have plastic. He says, ideally, you should open them up before Shabbat if you can. It's a chumrah. He says you don't have to, but to be machmir, if you want to be strict on yourself, he says it's a good idea. So that's a wonderful thing if you can. If you can't, you don't have to. He says plastic bottle caps, technically, you're allowed to open up, no problem. However, when I was discussing this with my Rebbe, Rabbi Belsky, he did mention to me exactly what I told you before, that plastic is one thing, but the metal bottle caps are a little bit different because of the fact that the very first time that they become a cap is when you remove it from the bottle. So in other words, you are creating that very first vessel. So for that reason, the metal bottle cap should not be removed. Now, what then is a possible solution? We said it's not a problem. Well, it certainly does seem like a problem. The answer is what we were talking about before. We said, Kol Mevatel-Kelim Peturim, which means any time that you are going to do something destructive. So it's forbidden still to be done rabbinically, but it's just a rabbinic rule. Comes along the Ran, Rabbeinu Nisim, and says that if there are times where there's a need for the destructive act, as we've learned in the past, so then you would be allowed to do that destructive act for the need of the sake of Shabbat. So in this case, you want to get your sparkling grape juice. So how can you do it? So we're telling you, hey, you're making a metal cap, and the first time that it's ever been a cap is when you pop it up. Big problem. What's the answer? You make a hole in the top of that metal cap. Take a knife, sharp knife, puncture it. So now all of a sudden you'll hear gas starting to come out of the sparkling grape juice, right? So now when you pop off the cap, so you didn't create a vessel due to the fact that it has a hole. So it's not a functioning vessel. You destroyed it. So that was a destructive act for a reason, for a purpose on Shabbat, and therefore the poskim permit that. If you make a hole in that bottle cap, you did not create a functioning vessel, and therefore that would be okay. The same way that those poskim permit people to smash open, and the times that we were talking about there, they had to smash open the tops of the bottles, those poskim permitted that because they viewed that as a destructive act for the sake of getting the contents inside of it. The Aruch HaShulchan talks about that. He says that's what they used to have to do. Smash open those bottles. Can you imagine? We're so blessed, Rabotai. We don't realize how blessed we are. I was talking to somebody the other day from Italy. Told me, in Iran was the same thing, by the way. 40, 50 years ago, they used to have to go to the bathroom outdoors. They had to go outside to the outhouse, do their business, and then come back in. Imagine you wake up at 3 in the morning, you have to go outside. Rabotai, we have indoor plumbing. Rabotai, indoor plumbing. What a blessing. We have to count our blessings. By the way, that's a very big avodah in Chodesh Elul. Chodesh Elul, you have to count your blessings. You have to go over and thank Hashem for every little thing that He gave you this year and every year before, and count your berachot. And that way you say, Hashem, I'm thanking you for everything that you gave me. So this year, Hashem, I want to continue to thank you for the things you give me. Right? So it's a big avodah to do that. So that's one example. That's one example where you can go ahead and do a destructive act in order to benefit from it. Okay. But let's talk about some basic examples before we get carried away. What is considered to be soter? So remember, we said anything attached to the building, if you remove it, we said, well, first of all, to put it on is considered building. That means to take it off would be considered destroying soter. So for example, we said you can't put a filter on a faucet on Shabbat, that's building. So to remove the sink filter from the faucet on Shabbat would be soter, would be destroying because you're removing something from a building. We said you can't put a screen on the window on Shabbat, that'd be building. You can't take the screen off the window on Shabbat, that'd be destroying, right? You can't detach. Interesting. You have a hose outdoors, piece on the hose. Hose is attached to the house. Can't detach the piece from the hose. Very interesting. You can't take a door off the hinges, right? The door is on the hinges. That's considered part of the structure. You need to schlep something big through those doors. You want to take the door off the hinges? No can do. Why? Because that would be removing part of the structure. That would be soter. That's asur to do that. If you have an old doorknob, say, enough of this thing. Enough of this old doorknob. Let me get rid of this thing. You want to take out the old doorknob? You can't do that. You're moving something from the structure. That's no good. You have a handle of the window crank that we said to put it on would be a problem of boneh. So to take it off would be a problem of soter. Let's say it's a problematic one or whatever it may be. That would be an issue. You can't take it off. Sometimes these old, knobs and cranks and things like that, they're not oiled enough. They're not whatever. To remove them would be a problem because you're removing it from a structure. To remove a nail from the wall, like we said, putting in a nail into the wall is boneh. If it's making that hole and it's sturdy, like we had learned already, if you had removed it and put it back, or moved it, put it back a bunch of times, it's not a problem. But over here, you put it in the first time, that would definitely, yes, be a problem of boneh. To remove it would be a problem of soter, right? Protruding nail, hook, right? Screw from the wall, that's an issue. Perhaps if it's, there might be permission to ask a goy to do it if it's a great need. We'll have to figure that out. Okay. So far, so good? Any questions? Yes.
What did you start with? When I came in?
I don't remember offhand. I can't remember. We just introducing the concept. Okay. Awesome. Good. Let's go. So we said that destruction for a permissible purpose is going to be okay. So we mentioned the bottle cap, very good example. The Gemara talks about what if you have a closet that is locked, right? And you need to access what is inside of it, let's say to get food inside. So the poskim say that in such a case, you would be allowed to ask a goy to smash it. Again, this is something which is rabbinic, right? It's rabbinically prohibited. Remember the rule that we learned in the past? Remember, guys, when are you allowed to ask a goy to do something? So there are lots of different examples. One of them is when it's a shvut d'shvut b'mikom mitzvah. Remember, when the whole violation we're dealing with in the first place is rabbinic. And like, for example, Rosh Hashanah is around the corner. Some kid decides to take the shofar and throw it up on a tree, right? And now there's a problem. You can't climb on the tree to get a shofar, as we learned when we learned the Melacha of Muktzeh, because climbing on a tree on Yom Tov and on Shabbat is forbidden. So it's forbidden rabbinically out of the fear that you might come to take something off of the tree. So we said that you can ask a goy. Why? Because you need it for the mitzvah of shofar. The isur, even if you would do it, is only rabbinic. To ask a goy to do it is rabbinic. So it's a rabbinic violation to do something which in the first place is only a rabbinic violation for the sake of a mitzvah. We said that's allowed. What's the term for that? Shvut, dishvut, b'mikom mitzvah. Remember that, guys? No? Shvut dishvut. That's an easy one. Shvut dishvut. They used to shvut dishvut. What?
Something that's what it means.
Shvut dishvut means you're asking a goy. Meaning in this case, that's what it means. It means you're asking a goy to do something which, even if the Jew would do it, is only prohibited midrabanan, rabbinically. For the sake of a mitzvah, right? For the sake of doing a mitzvah is permissible. Or for the sake of slight illness, or for the sake of some kind of great need, that would be okay. In this case, we have a closet that is locked, and you want to smash the lock in order to get the food inside. So in such a case, the poskim say you can ask a goy, because that would definitely be a shvut d'shvut. If it's for the purposes of the Shabbat food, you can do that. You can ask the goy to do that. Okay. Yes.
Taking off the window and the nail and the knob, these are all d'oraisa, or
it's a good question. It's a good question. So probably the nail is d'oraita. What else? The knob. So it depends on whether it's loose or whether it's in solid. In other words, if it was loose and just usually it's in solid, that would probably be only rabbinic to put it on and to take it off. Yeah, if it's loose. But if it's actually in there, it's in the door mamash, solid, that would be a d'oraita probably.
Screen.
Yeah. Yes.
Why is the screen an issue if it's like meant to latch off? Open it up.
Because it's meant to be on. It's not really meant to be taken on and off all the time. If it's needed to be removed, like a door also could technically be removed, but it's not meant to be removed. It's meant to stay there.
So what if like this was an example 2 weeks ago, there was a huge bug in my brother's room, and I opened the screen to let out the bug, so we didn't have to do anything about it, like because it was bothering me. Would that be acceptable, or?
Meaning you removed the screen in order to, where'd the bug go? Inside your house?
It was in his room, and I wanted to get it out, but I didn't want to kill it, so can't kill it. So I opened his screen.
Why don't you just, you couldn't lift it up? You had to take it off?
Yeah, the screen is the type I have to unlatch the 2 things.
Okay, got you.
Open it, so then there would be an opening for it to fly out.
Yeah, so that's meant to be there. That screen is meant to stay there the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like taking off part of the building. You can't really do that. That's the idea. If it was meant to come off, it's on and off, that might be something else. But here it's usually there. It's meant so that bugs and stuff shouldn't come in.
If they latch it so that it can be removed, I feel like some people like want the window open. I feel like it's like something you put on when you don't want you want to leave a filter on. When you want the window fully open, you just latch it off and it's off.
I mean, the problem is like this. It depends on what you normally do. In other words, a filter on a sink, let's say, is meant to be there until it's not usable anymore, right? So I could technically screw it off, but it's not the way it works. You leave it on, It's part of the building now. So if I leave this thing on and it's part of the building now, so that you can't really take it off. That's the point. Okay. All right. Now, there's another discussion that the poskim talk about when it comes to opening up cans on Shabbat. Tuna cans, let's say. You want to open up a tuna can. So the question again is, by me opening up this can, am I making a vessel now? Am I making a usable vessel or not? So there are those that permit it, no problem. But there are those who say, look, just for the sake of making it not a vessel, that, so what you do is you poke a hole in both sides, let's say, or you open up one side and you destroy the other side too. It's not a vessel anymore. So you didn't create a vessel. It's not a usable, functioning vessel. It's garbage.
A tuna can.
Tuna, any can, really. Any can. Moshe has a huge, long tshuva, Moshe Feinstein, about cans in general. He held that you really shouldn't open up any cans at all. He said that only if you're a Talmid Chacham. You should know soda cans are also not so simple. Some permit the soda cans. I personally stay away from soda cans on Shabbat because actually this is related to boneh. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat tells us that when a person has a chicken coop, so if he creates a hole in the chicken coop for air, for ventilation for the chickens, so that's called boneh. Why? Because whenever you create a petach, an opening that's asui le'achnisu le'utzi, which means that you are creating an opening which allows for air to exit and for new air to come in, that is considered to be an act of building on Shabbat. So some poskim, my Rebbe included, Mevatel-Keli writes that a soda can is designed in a way for that exact purpose. When you open the soda can, the whole idea is that there should be air that enters the can, and that will allow the soda to exit the can. So that's a petach, it's an opening that's created lehachnis, to let in air, ulehotzi, and to let out the soda. Like, for example, it's part of pouring. Like if you ever take a soda bottle or any bottle of water and you just kind of flip it on, upside down, it's much harder for the water to come out, right? It's because there's no air coming in. You don't allow the air to come in. If you pour it on its side, you'll notice that it's much easier because the air comes in and the liquid comes out. So that petach on the soda can, they want to say, is what we call a nekev yafeh, a nice hole that is for that exact purpose, for bringing in air and taking out the soda. For that reason, there are poskim who say soda cans should not be opened on Shabbat, and that's something which I try to stay away from personally on Shabbat. But there are those who permit it. There are those who permit opening soda cans on Shabbat. They claim, listen, holes here, holes there, the whole thing's going in the garbage. It's not a vessel. Don't worry about it, right? So there are two sides of the argument, right? So where do I stand on it? I try to be strict for myself. I'm not telling you that you have to, but that's what I do. Okay.
You don't open up tuna cans.
So tuna can. So the thing is like this: whenever you destroy the vessel,
there's also tuna jar.
Whenever you destroy the vessel, so then you don't have this problem in the first place. If I would, let's say, technically, I'd open up the top and poke a big hole in the soda can on the bottom, might get a little spritzy. It wouldn't be so, good. But it's not a vessel anymore. You understand? At that point, you do not have a vessel because there's a hole in the bottom of it or on the side of it. So it's not. You can't claim, well, he made a hole that was nice and it's a functioning vessel. It's not a vessel anymore. Understand? So they're saying, well, it's going straight in the garbage anyway, so it's not a vessel. So some want to say, if you pour it all out in one shot, then it's definitely not a vessel. But if you keep on using it, then it is a vessel because you continue using it. So cans, to make a long story short, are a big question mark. Some are more machmir, some are more lenient, and that's the big debate about cans. So therefore, I tell people, for the shul, for example, one time I showed up, they had lots of soda cans. I told the guys, I said, stop ordering cans, please. Get us, some bottles. There's a fellow here who was here just 20 minutes before we were learning. We started the shiur, and he brought beer cans one Shabbat for the kiddush. I told him, do me a favor, get bottles. He got bottles, and we don't have the cans question on Shabbat by us. Just avoid it. But at any rate, that's the idea. That's the reason for that, because they say that you're making a nice nekev, you're making a nice hole in the can. It's there to enter, to bring in air and to take out the liquid. That's a problem, and therefore they say it's an issue. So I try to stay away from cans on Shabbat, but again, there are those who are lenient, and somebody wants to be lenient, he has what to rely on. Okay. We had a question?
Yeah. The purpose of the can is not to bring in air. But, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
No, the hole, in other words, the design of the can, the hole that you make in that spot is to pour it. You should be able to pour it out of it. But the purpose is that when you open it up like that, that allows air to come in and the liquid to come out. I think that's what their argument is. Yeah.
There are other cans that I don't think, I'm not sure she asked you, but those cans that you have to like pull it open instead of can opener.
Yeah.
Hold
it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter how you open it. The point is that those who are strict with like tuna fish cans, corn cans, or whatever kind of can, those who are strict with it are saying, hey, you just made a vessel, so that's the problem. So what they would do is they would destroy the bottom of it too. It's not a vessel anymore. Again, there are those who are lenient regardless, and therefore it's acceptable, but it's up to you how you want to do it. What? So so some they make an effort to destroy the bottom, and that's how they go about it.
How do you destroy the bottom?
Welcome. What?
How do you destroy the bottom?
Poke a hole in it, or take off the other side.
You use a can to destroy the bottom.
And then you have no question. Yeah.
Are you allowed to use a can opener?
Yeah, if you are going to be using it for this, then yeah, you'd be allowed to.
But it's
okay.
Not like something that's a Muktzeh item.
Remember, even if it was Muktzeh, what's the halacha? Let's go. At this point, it should be on your fingertips. Let's go. You got this. What?
I don't know.
No, not Shevet Kaved. No. Pli shemelachto. What's the last word? Pli shemelachto le isur. Who said that? Very good. Amazing. Pli shemelachto isur. Very good. Okay. When it's a vessel that does a forbidden labor, even though it's a forbidden labor, if you want to use it for permissible job, like we said, the example of taking a hammer to crack open a coconut, taking a needle to, let's say, use it. I don't think people would do this, but for example, to stick it into the pineapple and, eat it like that, if you so desire, that would technically be okay because you're using a Muktzeh item that's a kli shemelachto le'isur, meaning a vessel that does a forbidden labor for a permissible use, and that would be okay. So even if we would categorize a can opener as a kli shemelachto le'isur for a permitted use, it would be okay.
So what about like baby bottles or like baby food or whatever? Like, like
those jars, you mean? To open a jar?
Like to make formula, or those nipples on these.
Okay.
I don't know, is that okay?
Meaning to bring the plastic part through the it's okay.
Attach it onto the.
That's all good. Sure. Very good.
I don't know, for some reason I was just thinking it applied.
No, it's very good. Yeah.
Just to summarize, any can we open, we should poke a hole through it just to make sure that it doesn't become a functional vessel.
Those machmirim, that's what they do. Yes. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to do that.
That's just the stringency?
Yes.
So you could technically just open a can and not be stringent and it's not breaking anything?
Technically, because you're going to remove the contents stored in the garbage, technically you have what's allowed.
Oh, so the hole in itself.
But those that are strict about it, what they do is they poke a hole through the bottom. I did not make a vessel. There's nothing here that's a vessel. It just, nothing happened. Okay.
Also, another one on this topic. What about jars? Are jars like glass?
Jars are no problem. Glass, what do you mean glass jar? Like with a thing with a lid on it? Yeah, no problem. You're not making a vessel. It's no problem.
So why?
Now, there's the whole discussion over here is, am I creating a vessel? For example, the bottle cap is a functioning bottle cap now. Beforehand, it was attached. It was a sheet of metal. It had never yet been formed into a cap, and now you pop it off for the first time. Look, I just made a bottle cap. And I can close the bottle, open the bottle, and I don't have to smash open a glass.
Same with the lid. You're making the lid.
Because the lid and the plastic bottle cap as well were already functioning vessels before. They just kind of put it on. Yeah, exactly. As opposed to this metal one, which the first time that it becomes a cap is actually when you pop it up.
Okay.
Yeah. That was
but is it a problem to use a bottle cap? To open a bottle cap on Shabbat?
So that's what I'm saying. So it depends on what kind. If it's plastic, technically, are those. So the metal ones you really should not open up on Shabbat unless what you do is you poke a hole in the top. Right?
That could be very problematic.
Yeah, so what you do is you just finish the sparkling grape juice bottle, dish it out to people, and that's it. That's all you got to do.
And what about wine? Can you open up wine?
Wine, a cork? Sure, no problem. A cork, yeah, definitely, no problem with a cork. Yeah. So while we're on the subject of Muktzeh, I want to discuss with you another kind of, it's a very interesting rabbinic rule that came up in the laws of Soter, in the laws of destroying on Shabbat. And it's a very interesting concept. It's called Mevatel-Keli mehechano, which means every vessel that exists in the world is usable in whatever way you would like to use it. Let's take, for example, a plate. I can take this plate and I can put food on it. I can play frisbee with it. I can do whatever I want to do with it. It's not a good idea, but I could technically do it, right? What happens, though, if I somehow manage to make this plate not usable anymore, not movable anymore? Like I limit its function. Well, how could you do that? The answer is if you put something that's Muktzeh on it, and the Muktzeh, which means something which is set aside, which you cannot move on Shabbat. Let's take, for example, eggshells. Eggshells on Shabbat are considered to be Muktzeh. Okay, so let's say I take this Muktzeh and I put it on this vessel. Now this vessel becomes what we call a basis. Basis means a base for the Muktzeh, at which point it gets the status of that Muktzeh itself. So in the same way that I can't move those eggshells on Shabbat because they are totally Muktzeh, let's say, for example, it's just one or two small eggshells that is not so gross that I could. There's another rule in the laws of Muktzeh which you should all know about, which is called graf shel re'i, which means that if you have something which is Muktzeh, but it's so gross to you that it just disturbs your Shabbat, so you can take it with your hands and remove it, even though it's Muktzeh, because it disturbs your Shabbat. The rabbis did not impose the rules of Muktzeh when it makes you unable to enjoy your Shabbat. So let's say a person had a massive pile of eggshells over here, okay? The guy was peeling eggs, and eggshells are 100% Muktzeh. Why are they Muktzeh? Because there's nothing that you can do with eggshells. Even if you were to feed it to a dog or to attempt to feed it to a dog, the dog wouldn't eat it. There's nothing there. It's just a shell, right? There's no meat there. There's no fat there. There's nothing. It's just a shell. So it is totally considered to be Muktzeh. So can you move it? No. But what if I had a huge mountain of eggshells on my table? And I'm grossed out by this. I can't sit down to learn here. I can't sit down to eat something here. I'm disgusted by it. So the rule is, that's called a graf shel re'i, which means like a bedpan. Graf shel re'i means a scooper of human waste, right? Sometimes people have a bedpan. They have something that they're able to relieve themselves in. And that item is obviously very foul. It smells, it stinks, it's disgusting, it's gross, and it's 100% Muktzeh. Why is it 100% Muktzeh? Because there's nothing you can do with that on Shabbat, right? There's nothing that you can do. It's totally set aside. There's really nothing to do with it. So it's Muktzeh 1,000,000%. But can you move it? Yes. Why? Because it completely disturbs your enjoyment of Shabbat. You can't function. I've got this thing right here. So if it's something, so Chazal said it's not limited to human waste. It's not limited to a bedpan. It's anything that gets in the way of you enjoying your Shabbat. Any kind of Muktzeh item that prevents you from enjoying Shabbat, you can take it with your hand and move it, no problem, right? Why again? Because it's preventing you from enjoying your Shabbat. So I have a huge pile of eggshells. Can I take it and throw it away? Absolutely. I have a huge pile of those seeds that people eat. Pumpkin seeds. This guy made a massive mountain of pumpkin seeds. Can you get rid of it? Absolutely.
But I thought you
get rid of it.
Put a little food on.
Wait a second. Don't jump the gun. Good question. Wait a second. Hold on. So now, let's say that I don't have a massive pile. So we're talking so far about a huge pile. Can you get rid of that? Sure you can. But I've got one eggshell, two eggshells. Is that something which would fall in the category of Grav Sheri'i, like the bedpan, the scooper of human waste? That's so disgusting and so gross. It's just a little shell. It doesn't really gross me out that much. So that's Muktzeh. And it's Muktzeh that I can't move on Shabbat, right? Because it doesn't gross me out. It's just one little shell. Okay. Let's say that one little shell, you now, for whatever reason, instead of taking the egg, and what I would normally do when I peel eggs is I throw those peels straight in the garbage, right? You have to move them. You have to worry about moving them. But instead, this guy took his eggshells and threw it onto a plate, an empty plate. The plate at this point becomes a basis. Basis, the davar ha'asur, which means a base for a muktzeh item that cannot be moved. At this moment, you know what has happened? On Shabbat, this person, quote unquote, just destroyed the plate. He just did an act, a rabbinic form of destruction on Shabbat. Why? Because what happened is this plate used to be a functioning vessel which could be moved from here to there, wherever you want. And now it's stuck on the table. It's been destroyed. Why? Because you can't really do much with it. You can't move it around anymore. It was prepared for anything you wanted. It was movable. Wherever you wanted to put it, you could put it. But now that you threw the eggshell onto it, you just, quote unquote, destroyed it. Others learn the opposite. Others learn you just built. How did you build? It's as if you took cement and you put the cement under the plate and cemented it onto the table. Now there's nothing you could do with it. That's called Mevatel-Keli mehechano. Mevatel means you nullify. Mevatel, mem, bet, tet, lamed, mevatel. You nullify. Kli, the vessel, mehechano, from being usable. It was muchan. It was prepared for anything you needed, and you were mevatel the kli mehechano. You nullified its ability to be used. So that's a form of muktzeh. Is that clear, Rabotai? Yeah? Yes? 100%? Okay.
You nullify the vessel
from being usable. Okay. Okay. So now, what Mrs. Hakim said very beautifully is the solution to this problem. The solution to this problem is, and again, I want to be clear about something. The problem that we're talking about now is when the plate became a basis on Shabbat. Okay, the word basis is clear to everyone. Basis, almost the same word in English, like a base, basis, basis, right? It's the base of it's holding something muktzeh. This idea is only applicable when Shabbat began. It was not a muktzeh item. And on Shabbat, it became a muktzeh item because you threw muktzeh onto it. You threw eggshells onto it on Shabbat. So now you made it into a vessel that cannot be moved. So that already is a problem in and of itself. That should have never happened, right? That's step one. How do you get around this problem? The answer is if you put a non-muktzeh item there first. So in the case, what kind of example did you give? Breadcrumbs?
rice.
Rice, beautiful. Let's talk about rice. So you put rice in that plate first. Rice is a food, right? 100%. You could use it, eat it, do whatever you want with rice,
You have to put
right?
it first?
You put the rice there first.
Oh, so it's you
And
can't
now-
put eggshells and then
Correct. Now that the rice is there, the plate is already serving as a base for non-muktzeh food. You then proceed to throw those very same eggshells or pumpkin seed, shells onto that plate, and they are 100% muktzeh. But since the plate has already began functioning as a base for the non-muktzeh, so now that there are muktzeh shells there, we no longer say that this plate is nullified. You can't move it anymore. It's cemented onto the table. However, which way you want to learn. We don't say that now. Why don't we say that? Because since the plate already functioned as a base to the non-Muktzeh, at this point, it is a base for both non-Muktzeh and Muktzeh, in which the non-Muktzeh is much more important, which is rice over here, than the Muktzeh shells, and therefore the plate still remains movable, usable, just like it was in the beginning, because it's not considered to be Muktzeh, being that its more important function is to serve the non-Muktzeh rice that we have in the plate. Is that clear?
It matters what order you do it in, unless it's all.
It most certainly does. Because in order to avoid, no, I'll tell you what. In other words, you're right, but you're wrong. I'll explain. You're right in the sense that if, let's say, on Shabbat, you threw eggshells onto the plate, if you want to get out of the situation, you can now put rice in that bowl, and now you're allowed to move that bowl or that plate. Why? Because now it has reached the status of a bowl that functions for both non-Muktzeh and Muktzeh, where the non-Muktzeh is more important, in this case rice, more important than the eggshells. You could move the bowl. It's okay, right? The problem is that the damage has been done, meaning for a moment in time on Shabbat, this has become already for a certain duration of time, you made this vessel nullified. You understand? For a certain moment in time, whether it was for a minute or for 10 minutes, it doesn't make a difference. You threw eggshells onto an empty plate, and in that moment, the term is you're Mevatel-Keli mehechano. You nullified the vessel for being able to be used, to be able to be moved. And the damage is done. Can you undo it? Yes. Now I want to be clear. The only time that you can undo it on Shabbat is if, to begin with, it only became Muktzeh on Shabbat. Meaning when Shabbat began, it was not Muktzeh. However, be very clear about this. If when Shabbat began, it was Muktzeh already, okay? Let's say that when Shabbat began, you had a bowl. Let's say you had, let's talk about candlesticks or a tray that holds up candlesticks. So the tray is a base for a Muktzeh item. The candlesticks are a Muktzeh item that were intentionally left on that tray. Even if somehow, let's say a goy on Shabbat took away those candlesticks from that tray is Muktzeh the whole Shabbat. Okay, there's a big difference between the two types of basis that we're talking about. The basis we started off with was a very light type of a basis. That basis was where you made it into a basis, which means you threw Muktzeh onto it on Shabbat. That can be undone on Shabbat. But a basis that started off Shabbat, meaning when sunset hit, this was an object that was holding up a Muktzeh item that was left there intentionally. So then that item, even if the Muktzeh was taken off of it, will remain Muktzeh the whole day, the whole 24 hours of Shabbat.
Even if you add things that are not.
Correct. Even if you were to add a million non-Muktzeh things, once Shabbat hit, that is going to be Muktzeh the whole Shabbat. So let's say, for example, there's a Sheva Berachot happening in a Simcha hall somewhere. The lady wants to light candles Friday night, and she cannot, for the life of her, find any spare room. There's no room on the table. There's no shelves. There's no place to light the candles. All she finds is a chair. And she goes and she puts that, well, you know what? Let's give a different example. I don't like that example, and I'll soon share with you why. Let's say she had plenty of room. Okay, put it that way. She had plenty of room. And she decided that the candles would look best on the chair. Okay, let's go with that. Okay, she decided the candles would look best on the chair, and she lights her Shabbat candles on the chair, and that is where she leaves the chair, right, with the Shabbat candles on the chair. Fine. A goy comes and cleans up the Shabbat candles, and the chair is still there. Shabbat morning, can that chair be moved? No. You know why? Because that chair on Friday night when Shabbat entered was a base, was a basis, lidavar ha'asur, for a muktzeh item. And the key is that it was left there intentionally. Because if it was left there unintentionally, then it would not happen. So for example, let's say somebody by mistake throws his wallet on his pillow when Shabbat comes in, right? So if he didn't mean to leave his wallet there, it would not be considered, the pillow would not be considered a base for the wallet because it was left unintentionally. That's another very important rule in the laws of basis. Okay? So I know we got off onto a muktzeh side tangent, but these are important rules to be aware of. So far, so hi, yes.
Just a quick question. Does it matter, like in the case of like the plate with the eggshells and stuff, like let's say for example you're eating pistachios or like seeds and you have a shell. Does it matter the amount of?
No.
Like it could be like you put, let's say, one pistachio that hasn't been eaten on the plate.
No, a pistachio that has not been eaten is not muktzeh. That's
right. So I'm saying, does it matter the amount of the item that isn't muktzeh that makes the plate then?
It needs to be it as long as the as long as the non-muktzeh is more important than the muktzeh, then you're good. So I guess a pistachio like in that case, is more important than a bunch of shells.
Right.
So that would still be good. That's the idea. Yeah. Okay, so we learned a lot just now. Okay, we learned a lot. Let's just go over this very briefly again. We started off with bitul kli me'echano, but we went into the laws of basis. So let's just recap the laws of basis quickly, a little overview, and then we'll move on. The idea is that a basis is anything that holds or is a support to a muktzeh item. Now, that item itself becomes muktzeh, and you may not move that on Shabbat. Now, the key is that there's a difference between a basis that started off Shabbat being a basis versus a basis that became a basis on Shabbat. The rule always with the laws of muktzeh is that when something becomes muktzeh at bein hashmashot, which means once the sun sets, it is a muktzeh item. If at that time it was already muktzeh, it katzai lekule yoma, which means it became muktzeh for the rest of the whole day, regardless of if what made it muktzeh in the first place is there or not there. It doesn't matter anymore. It's muktzeh the whole day. Okay? So if I have, let's say, eggshells on that plate, ben hashmashot, at the time of sunset, where at that moment Shabbat kicks in, boom, that's it. That plate is done. For the rest of Shabbat, you cannot move it here or there. It started off Shabbat as a muktzeh basis. It will remain that way the rest of the whole Shabbat. Yes?
Also in the case of like, let's say it's the opposite, like you started off with the example of like not having enough space. Let's say you need that chair.
Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So let's talk about it. So I was going to ask that. Let's talk about it now if you're asking. The idea is when you don't have room. In other words, that's why I retracted the example. When you don't have room to put something down, and due to the lack of room, you put that muktzeh item on top of other things. For example, let's say that you have a scale that measures your food, right? Some people like to measure their food. It's also very important to measure your food to know if you're eating kazait or less than a kazait, right? You have to wash netilat yadayim. If you don't have to, or if you have to say it with a bracha or not. You guys know that rule? Very important, right? If you're eating less than the kabeitzah, which means less than 54 grams, 56 grams of bread. So when you do wash netilat yadayim, but you don't say al netilat yadayim. Familiar with that rule? Right? Why? Because you only say al netilat yadayim when you eat a kabeitzah, which is around 54, 55, 56 grams, usually speaking. Okay? It's once it's kazait, which means 27 grams, birkat hamazon, if it's bread. Yeah, full benching. So you're measuring your food. You have a scale. You measure your food with a scale. Now you're looking for a good spot to put it. And, surely enough, Baruch Hashem, the cabinets are all loaded from top to bottom, and the only spot you find is right on top of a stack of 50 plates, right? So now, do those 50 plates become muktzeh? They're all basis, right? The answer is it doesn't become basis because it's true you intentionally put it there, but you were compelled to put it there. You didn't really want it there. You didn't mean to leave it there. A basis is not going to be really a basis. It will never be considered basis that you cannot move it, even if it was there when Shabbat began, if you put it there due to a lack of space. The Mishnah Berurah speaks that out clearly too. Okay. So therefore, Rabotai, if it began Shabbat that way, it's a basis for the rest of the whole Shabbat. If it did not begin Shabbat that way, but at a later time in Shabbat, somebody made it that way, so unfortunately, this fellow has violated either the way we learn it, a rabbinic form of building or a rabbinic form of destroying. Either he has spiritually cemented this plate to the table on Shabbat, which is a form of building, or he has destroyed the plate on Shabbat, which is a form of destroying. Either way, it's not good. So therefore, it's a problem. How would you get out of that? Well, like you said, you could throw some rice on it, and then you could move it again. But that's not really we shouldn't have done that in the first place. You should not have nullified the vessel for being able to be used in violation of the rule of the Chachamim. That's a big problem. So you can't do that on Shabbat. So a person should know that if they indeed do, for some reason, decide to throw Muktzeh onto a non-Muktzeh item, for example, a table also. Table is a vessel, right? Table. If you throw the shells onto a table, right, and you don't have something that's non-Muktzeh on the table, you'd be nullifying the table. It doesn't have to be only a plate, right? It's a problem. So you have to make sure in the first place that you put something on the table or on the plate that is important and that is not Muktzeh, in order that it should not be nullified. Okay? Now, important to be aware as well that if at the onset of Shabbat you had something in the Muktzeh bowl as well, for example, let's take that very same plate, okay? A plate that had eggshells in it. And we said that at the onset of Shabbat, the sun was setting and the shells were already there. It's not looking good for that plate for the rest of Shabbat. Even if somebody removes those eggshells, the plate is a problem the whole Shabbat, right? Like we learned, very good. What if you, in the nick of time, manage to put a roll in that plate? So now, before sunset, there's a roll and there are eggshells in that plate. So now, that plate is a basis, ledavar ha'asur ve'hamutar. It's a base for something which is prohibited and also something which is permitted. And therefore, you could still move it on Shabbat. Okay? Don't remove the roll from that plate on Shabbat and leave behind the eggshells, because now guess what you just did? You would be Mevatel-Keli mechano. You would nullify the vessel from being able to move for that time period, right? Because now you just left the eggshells there. What you could do is you could take the plate as is and shake off the eggshells into the garbage, and now you're good, right? So that's a very important point to remember as well. The base that we're talking about is only going to be a problem if it was with Muktzeh alone. But if there was a non-Muktzeh item on that base together with the Muktzeh item, and the non-Muktzeh was more important than the Muktzeh, then you are in the clear and you have not created a base. So again, important to remember just a couple more points, that it's never going to be a basis if you left it there unintentionally. Okay, so if it's also never going to be a basis if it's not your item. So let's say that your friend threw her purse on your pillow, right? Your friend cannot make your pillow into a Muktzeh item, right? That's important as well. If it's, again, your purse that you mistakenly left there, you didn't mean to leave it there, your your pillow is not going to be muktzeh. A dollar bill fell onto a cookie tray, right? So, that's something which we say, obviously, that would not make your item muktzeh. Why? Because the cookies are more chashuv than the dollar bill for you right now. What would you do? Shake off the cookie, shake off the coins or whatever it is. If it's covered up, if it's not, if I guess gonna spill all the cookies on the floor. Okay, good. So the concept is clear? Yes.
So I have a few questions.
Yeah.
What if somebody else gets eggshells on the table?
Yeah.
Take them off, or
So it depends. Are you grossed out by it?
it's a few, it's not a lot, but it's like leaves eggshells on the table.
So remember, there's a couple of rules. So number one, remember we said you can always move muktzeh in an indirect way. So that would be a case like that. Like, for example, if you want to move it with your elbow, right? Let's say you want to move it with your elbow, right? You want to move it with your foot. You can always move muktzeh like that, right? But just like that, with your hands, you have to be grossed out by it. This is one of these halachot that gets my wife insanely mad at me. Because what happens is like this. There's a huge bag of garbage, okay? Huge bag of garbage in the kitchen. Huge. And I walk right by it, and it does absolutely nothing. I'm not upset at it. I'm not grossed out by it. It doesn't do anything. For my wife, it makes her go nuts. Now I tell her, I can't move it. It's muktzeh. She says, but it's disgusting. I say, yeah, but I'm not grossed out by it. I'm just gonna sit somewhere else. I'm not sitting right here. Right? So right? So yeah. So she is so upset at me every time that happens, but I don't know if I'm allowed to move it, honestly. I don't know. It's muktzeh and it's not really grossing me out. So how can I move? Shalom bye. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yes, you can always move muktzeh k'la'achar yad, which means in a with your mouth, with your hand, with your foot, with your whatever it is. Yes.
So
in a weird way, that's the point.
I have two questions. So even the most that was like eggshells or something was on the table before Shabbat, like before Shkia, and now it's on the table on Shabbat, I can move it.
Again, what the eggshells were on the table before
Shabbat, like
eggshells. So muktzeh.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Shabbat? No.
No.
But
unless you're grossed out by it. So now the question is going to be: Is your table allowed to be moved now? Is your table a basis, the davar asur? You see, this is always the question. Let's say you left the candlesticks on your table. You left the candlesticks on a tray, right? How can you move the tray or not when the candlesticks go out?
Well, like, what if it was like unintentional? Let's say there's candles on the table or something unintentionally.
Right.
Can I move it on Shabbat? There was a way you can do that. Can I move it on Shabbat? Do
you can always move. So we hold like the Mishnah Berurah that says you can always move muktzeh with a shinui. You can always move muktzeh in a weird way. Your elbow, your foot. If you want to move it with your mouth, blow air at it.
So even if it was like established before Shabbat, on Shabbat, in a weird way.
Any muktzeh, you could move in a weird way, technically. The one opinion that was machmir on that is the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish felt that you can't kick it, you can't. That's not allowed. But Chacham Vadia and others, Mishnah Berurah held you're allowed to do it.
You can't move the thing that's holding.
You
like
can't.
Let's say there's eggshells on a plate that was there before Shabbat.
Okay.
You can't move it on Shabbat.
Right. Nor the plate. No, the plate is muktzeh now. Yeah, the plate became a basis. And even if a goy, let's say, would take away that muktzeh, it's a problem. The plate is still a problem.
And it's doraita?
No muktzeh is doraita. All muktzeh is d'Rabbanan.
So,
but the reason that we're talking about it now, I'm sorry. What?
The goy would be able to take the plate with the eggshells.
So that if you have a goy and you want to ask the goy to do that, so possibly you would be allowed to, because it's a shvut to shvut. Remember, it's Muktzeh is only rabbinic, and asking a goy is only rabbinic. If it's a great need for a mitzvah or something like that, technically you might have a heter. My point is though that for you yourself to do it, you have a problem.
But what if
right?
it was like you forgot that it was there, like it wasn't intentional, and I left it here for Shabbat, I can move it on Shabbat?
Oh, so you're saying I didn't intentionally leave the eggshells on the plate. I forgot to clean it up. I didn't want the eggshells on the plate.
Yeah. Like
Okay, that's a fair argument. So I left the eggshells on the plate by accident, by mistake. So that's not going to be called a basis. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So
Sometimes you.
the plate.
So at that point, you'd be allowed to move the plate. The plate would not be a basis. You can move it, and then you would shake off the eggshells. That's easy. You heard you saying? She's saying a good argument, guys. She's saying, what if the eggshells were left on the plate before Shabbat by accident? You forgot to clean it up. You didn't mean to leave it there. So then the plate would not be a basis, because it's only a basis if you meant to leave it there. Right? That's a very important thing. Yeah. No, anything. Knife, spoon. Excellent. Very good. Okay. So I have some more examples here. Let's take a look at these examples. You have, let's say that you had some disgusting water that came into a bucket of some sort. So that made it, for some reason, it made it Muktzeh. If you were to put in a non-Muktzeh tool, let's say like a scooper or something like that, that would make it not Muktzeh anymore, meaning that now you could move the bucket as is, because it's basis for Muktzeh and non-Muktzeh. Okay, here, great example. Wax or oil dripping from a candle into a bowl. Okay, you have wax, you have oil dripping from the candle into a bowl. So the wax and the oil dripping is Muktzeh. You put a fork or a knife into the bowl, exactly what you said. You made the bowl a basis for both a non-Muktzeh item and the Muktzeh item, and then Muktzeh is not as important as the non-Muktzeh, and that's why you could still move it. Money fell onto a bowl, table, cookie platter, a pillow, right? We said these things are not going to be, put something on, if you don't have anything on the table, so you put something on the table, it would not be basis for the Davar Asur only, it would be basis for something permissible and non-permissible, and therefore it would not be a Muktzeh problem anymore. In other words, you could move the whole thing as is and shake off the Muktzeh. Interesting, I saw you're not supposed to put water into an aquarium on Shabbat, because you're making that water not usable anymore, because now it's nullified to the aquarium. Unless the fish are going to die, which then you could put the water in, but what you're doing is you're actually nullifying the water for being able to be moved. So you can't pour water into an aquarium on Shabbat. Interesting. For that exact reason. The poskim asks a question. How could I blow my nose in a tissue on Shabbat? How could I throw garbage into a garbage bag on Shabbat? Isn't that nullifying the vessel? Right? Interesting question. I'm nullifying the vessel. Right? I'm taking a bag. It was usable. It was movable. I could do whatever. Now I'm putting junk into it. So isn't that now a vessel that is a basis for Muktzeh? And I made a basis for Muktzeh. That's a big problem. The poskim say it's not. You know why? You're not nullifying the vessel. You're using the vessel. In that case, that's how you use that vessel. This tissue is meant for somebody to blow his nose into that tissue. Therefore, it's not called nullifying the vessel. It's called using the vessel. Certain vessels are meant for the Muktzeh to go into them. And therefore, it's not called nullifying it. It's called using it. And therefore, that would be okay. That's how you could throw garbage into a garbage can or a garbage bag. And that's okay.
What if the tissue was thrown onto the plate instead of straight into the garbage?
Somebody threw a dirty tissue, which is definitely Muktzeh onto a plate, so it's no different than the eggshells. Same,
on a table.
On a table, same story.
So you can't take the dirty tissue off the table on Shabbat?
What?
You can't take the dirty tissue off the table on
If it
Shabbat?
grosses you out, then you could. If it doesn't, Right? Yeah. Okay.
Let's say they have in mind like, oh, it's a tissue and like I want to throw it out soon, but I want to leave it here.
I'm sorry, one more time.
Let's say like you want to leave it next to you temporarily. You're like, oh, I want to leave it
Yeah.
like on your lap or something.
And then you wanna
Throw it out, but you're like you have it in mind that you're gonna throw it out.
and then you forget it there?
No, you just don't throw it out right away. Like, let's say you use the tissue and you like leave it next to you.
Okay. And you want to use it again?
Yeah, like just to have next to you.
Okay.
So do you have to throw it in the garbage right away?
No, because it's not Muktzeh yet. It's still usable. Yeah.
But only like once it becomes unusable.
Once it's garbage, now you put it on the table, so it's Muktzeh. It's a problem. Okay. What if somebody does natilat yadayim into a bowl? Now the bowl has dirty, so to say, water. Is that called being Mevatel-Keli meichano? So again, are you making the bowl not usable now? So the Mishnah Berurah says that as long as it's not mixed in with like cement or something, the water is still not considered to be muktzeh because your hands aren't like that dirty that it's got pieces of garbage on it. So it's not considered to be like muktzeh mamash going into the bowl, and therefore it's considered to be non-muktzeh. All right, guys, we'll stop over here. Went for a while, Baruch Hashem. Sorry if I went over time. It's good mitzvot.